Are you in the market for top-notch digital equipment such as mills, scanners, or furnaces?
Wow, God, time is now. Ivoclar has introduced unbeatable rates exclusively for customers in North America.
Ivoclar has made it easy for you to invest in cutting-edge digital equipment with, ready for this, lower than prime interest rates.
I think that's no pun intended, but whether you're looking to upgrade your milling capabilities, enhance your scanning technology, or optimize your furnace performance, Ivoclar Digital has you covered.
To take advantage of this offer, the dedicated digital specialists at Ivoclar are ready to assist you. For details on how to get in touch, visit voicesfromthebench.com and select the Ivoclar tab to find all the information you need to get started. And as always, we appreciate your sponsorship of the podcast, Ivoclar. Welcome to Voices from the Bench, a dental laboratory podcast. Send us an email at info@voicesfromthebench.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Greetings and welcome to episode 298 of Voices from the Bench. My name is Albert.
And my name is Barbara.
And my name is Joe.
Joe!
Hey!
What the hell, Joe? What are you doing here?
Super surprised.
For those that don't know, Joe Young, multi-episode guest.
Oh, heck yeah.
And creator of Fans of Voices from the Bench on Facebook.
Feel free to join.
Yeah, please do. Lots of fun. But Joe, what the hell are you doing with Barb?
Well, we're at a committee meeting for NADL, NBC, and the foundation. And you guys just happened to be recording. So I felt like I wanted to come by and say hi.
Yeah, we were hanging out yesterday, and he looked at me and said, "Are you guys recording?" And I was like, "Oh, that's freaking great. Come on." And so it just worked out. We're in beautiful Tampa, my home state. It's awesome outside. We're outside just chilling. We only have a quick break, but he's the bomb. So number one fan right here, Joe Young.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Like a wedding, you're crashing our episode.
That's right. And fun fact, I'm actually a wedding officiant. So
yes,
it is.
Oh, I do know that about you.
It is kind of fitting.
So you guys are both in Tampa and you're sitting outside right now? I hate you so much.
Yes, we are. And there's a little cloud in the sky. It's kind of chilly for Tampa. It's probably 60 something, but yeah, we're killing it. We're working hard, doing our executive committee initiative, having a wonderful meeting, and now we're doing the intro with you.
Yeah, so just real quick, NADL, the foundation, and the NBC, these are the higher end board members that get together and kind of wrap up the year, make plans for next year?
Yes, exactly.
That's right.
Bingo.
Joe, are you president next year?
No, I'm going to be president-elect next year.
Nice.
Oh, so you get 2025.
Denise Burris, she's president.
Oh, she hasn't been president yet already? She does everything else.
This is her year.
Nice. Good for her. We'll have to have her on the podcast
Great.
to talk about plans.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I know you guys got some rubbery chicken to get back to there at the hotel, so let's get on to the episode.
Let's do it.
This week, because Barb was not present and Joe wasn't invited, I got to talk to a gentleman that came all the way from Australia, and we love talking to people from other parts of the world. He reached out to us on Instagram and had a pretty interesting and unique story. Sam Talassinos grew up in his father's lab, one of the biggest labs in Australia. Sam watched his dad work hard, as most technicians do, and wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. As we all know how that goes, eventually Sam started to work in the lab. He helped the lab get into digital technology as many of the second-generation technicians did, and after getting some pretty bad service and training, buying some of the expensive equipment, he had an idea. Sam wanted to start a milling service and equipment reselling company that sold what they used and used what they sold.
That's one hell of an idea.
Isn't it?
So myself.
That's when XYZ Dental got started.
Nice.
And it grew from there. Sam comes on the podcast to talk about the lab, starting XYZ, how they help labs a little different, and what's also cool, his role on the board of the Australian Dental Laboratory Association, and that semi-recent move where they deregulated dental technicians in Australia.
Well, that's bullshit.
It is huge bullshit.
Jeez.
It's a great look into dental labs down under, so join us as we chat with Sam. Whether you're looking to elevate your craftsmanship or looking to cut back on cost, look no further.
VITA MFT teeth are the ultimate solution for creating lifelike and stunning smiles.
Crafted with precision and backed by cutting-edge technology, VITA MFT teeth offer unparalleled aesthetics and durability.
And since VITA believes in the power of experiencing excellence firsthand, for a limited time only, they are offering you the chance to get a complimentary case sample.
That's right, a full case absolutely free. Just visit vitanorthamerica.com/free MFT.
Don't wait any longer to start providing your customers a premium tooth at an economy price. Redeem your free case sample, and if you're ready to buy, VITA will even give you an extra 10% off discount by shopping online on their newly launched online store.
Join the VITA family today, and we appreciate your support of the podcast.
Hey, it's Candulor from Switzerland. We have been designing teeth since 1936. Successful tooth design knows only one benchmark: your own standards and those of your patients. Discover our tooth line PhysioSet TCR with new 18 anterior molds, manufactured specially for the US market and your daily work at your bench. If you are looking for new options in removable, get to know us at candulor.com and find out more. You will be supported and supplied by our authorized dealer, Edmunds Dental Supply. Candulor. High-end only.
Voices from the bench. The interview. Oh yeah, I have no idea how to say your last name.
So it's Talassinos.
Talassinos?
Yeah, close enough. I mean, after a couple of drinks, I can barely say it myself.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst Greek surname that you encounter, believe it or not. So, yeah, but Talassinos is fine.
Awesome. Sam Talassinos.
Yep.
Welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Really well, Elvis. Yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate you connecting with us on a little bit of an odd time because you're actually coming to us from tomorrow, I hear.
Correct. We're in the future.
Yes. How is it? Is everything still okay in the future?
Yeah, I mean, not a whole heap has changed. The world looks like it's in one piece.
Nice.
We got Melbourne weather outside, so it's really cold right now, and then, by the afternoon it'll be sunbathing weather. So, yeah, no, listen, everything's going swimmingly.
Sounds very American Midwest.
Right.
Four seasons every day.
Yes, that's what they say here too.
Well, Sam, obviously, you're calling in from Australia, and this is exciting. We don't get a whole lot. I mean, we've had quite a few, but you have a unique position there in Australia with XYZ Dental.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so let's kind of get into really how you came into the industry before we get into what the end of the alphabet means.
Okay, cool. So, wow, where do I start? So, okay, I'm a second-generation dental person.
Yeah. Father,
George, owns a laboratory in Melbourne, which is one of Australia's largest. It's called Giorgio Dental Laboratory. So they're a full-service lab, specialising in crowns and all-on-4 kind of work.
Yeah, you said the largest?
One off, yeah.
One off of the largest, okay.
Well, one of the largest. The thing is with large labs in Australia, if you're one of the largest, it's like being the tallest midget. I mean, when you compare it to labs in the States, they're quite small. But, in the context of we have 24, 25 million people in Australia, we have quite a geographic kind of disparity in respects to, huge landmass, but only so many people. So it does present some unique challenges around how labs can support their clients. There's a lot of outer regional clients that have to be serviced by an increasingly, like to say, schizophrenic postal service. Sometimes, and I mean, I have that challenge in my own business now that I'm not in labs anymore, but when you're supplying, CAD/CAM products to people and the next suburb over can't get something overnight, but then some random outback dentist gets his Voco blocks the next day.
Do you not have UPS out there?
We have a form of it. We have a few different forms of it, but they're not great. So, we have our TNTs and we have our, in Australia, we use Star Trek, which is, an offshoot of the Australia Post. So, I mean, we have them. They're just not.
Yeah.
But first world problems, we can still service clients. But
sure.
So going back to that, so Dad, I'm a second generation dental person, although I had absolutely no interest in becoming, part of the profession, whether that's as a clinician, like Dad is. Dad's also a prosthetist, which I think in America, you call them denturists, I think, over here. Yeah. And he's a fairly well-credentialed ceramist. He trained with, the original Yamamoto and done some stuff with Oliver Bricks and Dubassi. And it's funny, he doesn't really get, all that starstruck, but, don't touch his Dubassi book, that has from Dubassi. Don't touch his Yamamoto books. It's like, okay, dude, it's cool. He treats them the way I kind of treat Leo Messi signed shirt. It's a thing. He loves it. But yeah, so Dad was a son of Greek immigrants and pulled himself up by his bootstraps, all that kind of story, and established a lab effectively from home to start off with after, being a part owner of another major lab in his 20s. And, that business was a family business and continued to grow. And simultaneously, was on my own path. I, did okay at school and went off to university and decided to do a business degree. I wanted to get into marketing. I had no interest in dental at all.
So you grew up in the lab, though. I mean, it was in your house.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that was only the first couple of years. But even after that, I mean, I remember one of my favorite soccer players here was getting a crown done, and I begged my dad to touch the coping, and sandblast it because that was going to go in his mouth. And I was so excited. That was 8. So I suppose that's when my service started. But, yeah, I mean, it was a family business and started really small. But I suppose, I saw how hard Dad worked, and I did love dentistry, probably not because of hard work. We were never shy of hard work, but I mean, this isn't a psychologist's couch, but I suppose, seeing that.
Actually, it is, so lay back.
Cool.
Yeah.
So everyone could join in. But no, listen, I saw Dad as working really hard, and I craved, to be like him, to be around him, but I certainly didn't want to. I suppose the hours just seemed.
We live it. We get it. And, the unappreciative, the thankless work that you do.
Makes so much sense to me. I mean, I prefer looking at those memes than political ones because it's just like, I get that. The lab sheets with absolutely no detail on it and just do the best you can. And, 2 teeth in the impressions. And it's like, oh, fantastic. Yeah, we'll do the best we can. I grew up that way and, I went off eventually and, I was a young entrepreneur. I was in the rag trade when I was quite young. And
the what trade?
The rag trade, so clothing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. I potted around with that whilst doing my degree and had my own business with a little bit of money that I'd saved up from doing retail work and hospitality. And, that was around 19 and, I was doing my degree and then I said to Dad, listen, we take a bit of a gap year off. Can I just come and work with you and just give you a little bit of a hand? And I did that for the school year, and again, just made a few changes in terms of marketing and, doing anything I could around the lab and the like. And then went back to uni, finished that off, had my business, which was still running there in the background. It was a clothing boutique and was doing okay. Sold that, worked as an account manager and design for L'Oreal Professional. Did that for a year and on paper looked great, finished my degree and this was the corporate career I was going to head down.
Yeah.
I was miserable after a year, and I said, this isn't me. And Dad pulled me aside. He said, listen, mate, I really need help because we're trying to grow the lab. I want to do a little bit more in terms of, marketing, and, his logo was still something that was pulled out of Microsoft Word. They wanted to work on their processes as well, and, effectively bring it into the 21st century.
Sure.
And fantastic lab, really good skills, technicians who'd been with him from the start, from when he started in the early 90s. So the lab's going on 33 years now, or 32 years, something like that. So he had his guys there from the start. And, I said, okay, I'll help you out for 6 months because I want to get back into clothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's turned into 10 years.
Yeah, famous last words, sure.
And because after every 6 months, there would be something else to do. There'd be a new lab management system to bring into play. There would be a new market that we wanted to explore. There'd be a new product to introduce. And, we just continue to work and build it. And it was fantastic. And I grew to love the industry. In some ways, I didn't. And I suppose XYZ had come about because, Dad was one of the first guys to bring in in-house milling into laboratories. So he was one of the largest users of the Noble Biocare system.
Oh, sure, the Procera, yeah.
Yeah. So he's one of the largest users of Procera, brought the first Procera in, or one of the first, I believe. We're a huge customer of theirs. We had done a lot around bringing in like AGC crowns, like Oro Galvano crowns, and whatever that was kind of at that time on the edges. And, he was doing a little bit of work as a KOL for 3MSB and presented at the Noble Biocare Symposium for his for the Giorgio sectional bridge, which was a patent that he had. So we were getting some really cool traction and things were going well.
Sure.
You know what? This is time. Let's get our own milling machine and our own system. And a reseller for a CAD/CAM machine had effectively sold us this machine for, I think it was about $500,000 Australian dollars or $750,000 Australian dollars.
Yeah.
Pretty much left us a manual in German. A little bit of training. I think eventually we got a translated version, and then they kind of left us to our own devices. And you got to work it out. And
good luck.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have had the same experience over in the States in those early days, but it was really scary because, we signed a contract to only use their materials and had no support effectively, very little amount of support. And I remember saying to my dad, I've worked in a few other industries and, I know I'm young and all, but isn't it weird that a guy who sells you a car, right, you'd expect he'd have a driver's license.
Yeah.
In this industry, someone can sell you something and have no idea what to do with it at all. Just stare at it and say, yeah, now listen, we'll hook you up with another user in the States or another user in Japan. And I think, Dad eventually had actually met the Maya brothers over in Vegas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They were fantastic. So Dad went over there and got to learn about it, how to use the machine. And the reseller at the time had sent him over there. I think it was, I don't know if it was, but it might have been under threat of litigation, but they sent him over there. The boys there really helped him out. There was another Japanese user and he helped out as well a little bit, but, we took him out of the lab and I thought it was insane. So that kind of set the seed even from those days. And then later on, we took on more 3Shape licenses and, and others and scanners and the like. And I just thought, we don't have anyone like a Glidewell here or I think CAP it was that used to do it, where they actually had an understanding of the stuff that they were selling, and they had a milling center or a production center that backed it up as well. And I said, one day I want to have a company that uses what it sells and sells what it uses, and I want to have a milling center and eventually a 3D printing center, of course, that can produce work on behalf of labs and, larger scale practice groups until such time that they're ready to take on their own bit of technology. So that's what we do. That's what XYZ Dental is. It is effectively a supplier of milling machines, 3D printers, all the consumables and accessories that complement a digital workflow. But also we have a production center that produces anything from basic chrome cobalt copings and substructures to, full arch, titanium, direct to fixture, work. Also zirconia, of course, bike plates, the whole gamut. And then effectively what happens, and we see it a lot, where a client starts with us really small, sends us a little bit of milling, and then we get to a stage where their lab bill's pretty high or their milling center bill's pretty high. And I'm like, dude, I think it's time. I think we can supply you 52D from Roland, or we can supply you. You're doing a lot of bars. It actually makes sense to buy your own home cycle machine. There's that side of it. And the other side was that I also, with that in mind, with the whole support kind of thing in the back of my mind, I also saw what the chairside market was doing in Australia in those days. And speaking to clients who, I won't say the name, but they'd gone and spent a lot of money on a closed system. And listen, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think it's fantastic in terms of just spits out what you need it to spit out and dumbs it all down for you. That's great. But I felt that would it be great if there was a scalable option? So, the scalable option would be that you can start with an intraoral scanner, and you can then add on what we call Klaus, which is our system, which is effectively an integration between exocad and actual mills, which gives you a full kind of chairside solution, but at your own pace. So that's XYZ. That's what it does.
When you started working for your father and you were introducing all of these new technology to these technicians that have been sitting there since the 70s, was there pushback, or did you find that they gravitated towards this technology pretty well? Especially your dad. I mean, was your dad on board?
Oh, no, he was the driving force. So I think it's not the age. I think it's more the mentality. And I'll be kinder to them. They were more from the 80s, those guys.
Okay, sure.
I think we might have had one guy that was from the late 70s. He'll kill me if I... he's just only recently retired. He'd kill me if I told everyone he started in the 70s. Dad pretty much ended his apprenticeship just on 1980, but he was still very, very much attracted to anything that would make his work better and his life easier. I suppose whether that was a piece of technology, whether that was a staff member, whether that was a system, a material, he gravitated towards that. And I think the other thing is I've always believed that we need to work in the present. And what we did in the past, that's great. But famous last words are, I've always done it that way.
Oh, sure.
There's always that story about the first guy who did the high jump going backwards. Just as he gets towards the bar, he turned his back and jumped over and beat the world record twice. Now, everybody else leading up until that moment just tried to jump over it forward. And this guy just thought simply, well, hang on, I'm going to get a lot more push once I jump off my toes with my back arching over the bar. And it's sometimes a simple push sometimes. Sometimes it is just like, well, sure, you've done it that way forever, but here's another way.
So the high jump, people always used to jump forward?
Yeah, look it up.
I don't doubt you. I just like...
Mental. It's crazy, isn't it?
Really makes sense.
Well, it does, right? Because they were told that.
I love that analogy. That's great.
I've always said it's famous last words. Just because we've done it this way doesn't mean that it is the right way or that we can't augment it. We can't change it.
Sure.
And to be frank with you, anyone that had enough pushback didn't really last long, because ultimately, if they're not, we're talking a 50-man lab, right? If we're not all pulling in the same direction and trying to push each other to do better every day, then you're probably not going to last long. Not, you're going to get given your marching orders, but effectively you kind of don't fit in. You don't fit in with the culture of the place. It's kind of like a sporting team, right? We, as from a management perspective, we try and give the best environment for people, to do the best that they can every day. Now, if they choose not to take up that opportunity, then I suppose it's on them, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
I think that's the same. You've obviously worked in labs and, you've seen how labs work. And I think the best managers are the ones that kind of let their staff just do it, but provide a good environment to do that. So, yeah.
So when you started XYZ, was it in your dad's lab or did you branch out?
Oh, no, I branched out. So effectively, the first office was actually in the garage behind the lab.
Nice.
He had some space there, yeah. So started off with one big 3D printer.
You started printing first.
Yeah, because, so the first thing that happened was while I was still at Giorgio, I had secured a grant for them for a large format 3D printer. It was a 3D systems thing. And we ended up saving 6 tons of plaster waste in the first year, which won a Sustainability Victoria Award, so our region here. And we secured a pretty small grant. I mean, it didn't really cover all that much, but it was just a nice recognition that we had done something that was sustainable, and it also was providing really nice 3D print.
You got acknowledged for using less plaster?
Yeah, because there's a lot of plaster and runoff and water and track cleaning. Yeah, so that was a huge thing.
But doesn't 3D printing have its own problems with the alcohol and the non-biodegradable resins and all that? Or
it does, but effectively because there's not as much runoff and because of, I suppose, the robustness of the model. Listen, let's be frank, it's probably not that much better. But it is better in that you just print what you need, particularly if your nesting is done right and you're not using...
Sure, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but in terms of getting rid of plaster, I mean, that in itself is a bit of a quagmire in terms of keeping it clean and the amount of water that's being used to produce that. But yeah, there's certainly an argument. I don't think that 3D printing is perfect in that respect, particularly, the use of power and all the rest of it. But, take into account PBS impressions, alginates,
Don't get me wrong. I think you should get an award just for not pouring models. Honestly. I
think just for the mess, to be honest with you. So it's funny, I was having a conversation with a practice yesterday, and the guy goes to me, he just said, I'm sorry if I won't curse on air, but he said, just there's all this crap everywhere in this plaster room. And I said, send me a photo. And all it was that the guys have been pouring models, with these old dentists. They were using the vibrators. They weren't really cleaning up after themselves. And then I sent him a photo of another client that just had, a little Lasiga Max UV printer sitting there in the corner, humming away, printing the models out, with bath next to it. And I said, if you're just pouring models, then just do this. Just buy the printer and you'll be happy. And you'll use a lot less space. So,
so you got the printer. You're in the...
Yeah, so that was with George, and we won that. And then as part of that process, I'd been contacted by 3D Systems, and they said, hey, you guys know a lot about these printers. Have you thought about perhaps you could distribute them on our behalf? And I said, I actually have thought about doing that. So XYZ was born initially as a 3D printing bureau for other laboratories. And we went to all the Giorgio's biggest competitors, and we went to smaller labs who hadn't quite gotten around to buying their own 3D printer. And at that stage, no one really had, even the big labs. So we started just 3D printing. And then, there was a way we could come up with a bit of revenue to start off with, and then just slowly added on some brands to distribute. So Dental Wings was one, then IMS Ivoclar, of course, Roland, White Peaks. White Peaks was actually probably our earliest partner, and we've just continued to add on brands that we love working with, and the ones that we would use ourselves. I can't sell and I get contacted all the time, hey, why don't you work with us and sell an OEM zirconia? Problem with that being is that I don't like your zirconia. And
it's because it sucks.
But it's so much cheaper. That's great. Oh, you need a second option to give your client. Well, no, I don't. I'm going to give them the option that we use in the milling center because it works. Clients are happy. And guess what? When they're using it in the milling center and then they move on and you sell them a milling machine, they're going to want to use the same zirconia. And if they don't, they'll learn very quickly that they should be using that zirconia. And they also should be taking in and comprehending the training and the support that we give them around, sintering cycles, around post-processing of these materials. As I was saying, we started off there as a reseller of a few small bits and pieces. But then we were given a great opportunity by Straumann here in Australia to support the CARES digital system. So CARES is a rebranded Benelwings system, lab and chairside solutions, as well as co-diagnostics, the guided surgery software. So we collaborated really well with them. It was, not easy because they're in the process of acquiring the whole company. So kind of working out where the lines of demarcation were was a challenge, I must admit. But we still have a great relationship with them. But we moved on from Dental Wings a few years ago and moved more towards exocad as a platform.
Yeah.
Owing to how open it is and it works quite well.
Are people still using Dental Wings in Australia? I mean, it's pretty dead here in America. I mean, except for Straumann, but...
Yeah, not really, to be honest with you. Which is a shame. I mean, it had a lot of great potential. But obviously, Elvis, there's people way above our pay grades who make decisions on a corporate level. And whilst we may not understand them, I've learned very quickly that you can't get too attached to brands. They're not people. You can't get too attached to the product. It's just a product. It can be rebranded the next day. It could be completely swallowed by a new company, and you just need to deal with it. The main thing is the customer and ensuring that they're supported and treating them the same way you would have expected to be treated as a lab owner or manager. I felt the pain. I know what it's like when you call up your rep and say, hey, my scanner is down, and they say, I've just sold it to you. I don't know how to fix that. And then you've got to send it, by FedEx to some random service center, and you don't have a scanner,
Yeah, you just bought it and it's gone for 3 months.
And I felt that pain. So I always remind myself, I'm very clear that when, my team, when I talk to the support team and say, guys, that customer has spent a lot of money on this and they're really relying on it. And I know what that's like to rely on that piece of equipment. So if we can support them, if we can do our very best every day to support them, then, they're going to be really happy. And that engenders a really good relationship between us and them, and really for us, it's support first, ask questions later. We don't really care if you're not under a support agreement or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. We don't need your customer number. We know who you are. Everything recorded in our CRM. Let's just get it done. Let's get it fixed, and we'll sort out the details later, so to speak.
Yeah, but you said when you started, you were working out of your dad's lab garage selling to competitors. How did that go? I mean,
it was a separate building.
But didn't they know you? You were the owner's son.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's funny because I probably spent the first 3 or 4 years dealing with that. And, you would say to them, well, this is a separate business and I'm not part of Georgia anymore. I don't draw a wage from them. I don't, put it this way, George doesn't use exocad as his primary design software. Now, if he was really in bed with me or really wanted to support me all that much, he would use absolutely everything that I sell. But he doesn't. He uses what suits him. So we are separate businesses, and we separated the whole family, I suppose, aspects of our businesses quite well. It's not to say we don't collaborate really well. The Milling Centre is actually a separately branded company. It's called Axios, and it's still within my building. But we've done a lot of collaborative work with some of his biggest competitors and him, particularly around full arch work. And there's a certain level of maturity that has to be there. And it's funny, the largest competitors, the guys who are 30-man plus labs, are ones that got over it quicker than the smaller guys because they're practical. They're like, well, this guy sells products and supports equipment better than anyone else. Doesn't matter what his surname is. And ultimately, we want a little bit of what he's got, right?
Yeah, you got to make a smart decision.
Well, yeah, and I don't favour one or the other. It's not like I'm out there, if someone asks me, of course, yeah, that's where I came from. I managed quite a large laboratory, but at the end of the day, that means absolutely nothing now. I live in the present. I focus on what's ahead of us with XYZ, and most people have matured up about it. There's always instances, and you're always going to cop some flack with some people, but then at the end of the day, that's for them. I would rather, if it was me, I'd rather work with a supplier that is going to give me the best possible support and service, no matter what his background is. Haven't killed anyone, sure. 15 years ago, I might have taken one of your clients when I was a charming business development manager, but now I'm old and grey, approaching 40, and I'm doing my own thing. Mm-hmm. I'm here to support you. So most people are happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. When did the milling center come into play? Because it sounds like you sold product or equipment first.
Oh, no. So I had a mill, let me see, that would have been a year into the business. So I was never going to be in a position where I could sell a milling machine without using that one myself. I mean, of course, Georgia had their own machines, and my team, had worked with similar mills in the past. So I needed to make sure that we were prepared. A lot of the capital that I used at the start was about getting people trained up, sending them over to, the States for 3D systems to learn the printers, over to Germany, to Ivoclar to learn about the mills, and eventually over to the guys who make Millbox, the CAM software, so over to their subsidiary in Thailand. So, we over time made several trips around the world. And I should mention as well, I'm not the technical brains of the business, so I don't, I don't repair milling machines myself. I at the end of the day, I play to my strengths, which is about developing processes and, supporting the business and trying for growth, not just from a top line or bottom line perspective, but also from exposure and ensuring that we can spread our network wider with people and spread the message about, particularly these days, it's spreading the message around open workflows. Like Klaus, like our mills that can speak to anything. So, yeah.
So did you ever try to troubleshoot equipment, or did you just know from the start, like, not my thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things I can troubleshoot, but yeah, it's not my thing. I mean, at the end of the day, and, at a stretch, sure, I can get someone out of trouble, but
sure.
I'm one of those, I've got a bit of an issue with perfectionism. So if I can't completely understand that machine from top to bottom, then I don't want to support it. And I suppose that rubs off on the staff to an extent. I don't want to ever be in a position where someone asks me a question and I can't answer it. So for me, yeah, sure, I could certainly troubleshoot myself, or I can get you out of trouble, but I would rather have a good apparatus and a good team in place and some depth in that team where we can ensure that we can get the customer back online and have the backup of the milling centre there if, God forbid, something goes wrong. And you get that. We had a customer that they got completely flooded and we had to do all their bars for them, for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's what the milling centre is there for. It's for backup. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's all the same material, the same equipment, so their clients don't see a difference or a hiccup.
Yeah, except they're just not getting it done in-house, it's just that extra time rate. But, we expedite all of that, and there's processes in place for that.
So you sell a lot of different equipment, and obviously you don't have people that can troubleshoot all of it, right? I mean, you have to have specialties within your staff?
No, not necessarily. And buy a lot of equipment. I mean, we've got, so from a milling machine perspective, we've got Roland and Ivoclar, and their CAM softwares they're based on Millbox. So even the Ivoclar has its own branded CAM, but it's effectively Millbox with augmented strategies. Roland also uses Millbox too. There's a Sega So that's our only 3D printer. We don't sell any other 3D printers.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And there's ExoCAD. And from a CapEx perspective, we've got a couple of furnaces as well. So there's not a hell of a lot. We don't really need to necessarily at this stage have specialties, although a couple of the guys, a little bit better at ExoCAD than others. I also use the milling center as a means of graduating staff through. So one of my staff members was a manager at the milling center until about, 6 months ago. And I brought him on as a support person within XYZ, within the mothership. And I'll continue to do that because I always say we use what we sell and sell what we use. So I genuinely want people in there that keep their eye in and actually understand how to use these machines on a regular basis. And, those guys in support still go in to keep their eye in and will jump in and do some things in the milling center to ensure that, they keep their form up, so to speak.
Well, yeah. I mean, the milling center has their own technical support right there with XYZ. I mean, they're just right there. Yeah, that's great, though. I mean, I love hearing that someone that repairs this stuff or troubleshoots it or whatever needs actually uses it. I can't tell you how many times I've had a piece of equipment and then somebody from the corporate shows up and they've obviously never used it. They know about it. They know how to open it up. They know how to unscrew things, but they don't use it. You know what I'm saying?
I totally agree. And I think that was where if I go back to earlier in the conversation, I think that's where my whole thing on this is insane. Like a guy selling a car without a driver's license. And there is, to be honest, and please understand, this is absolutely no way any detraction from these people as being, good workers and good people, and I suppose good for the industry. I mean, they certainly help us from a reputational standpoint, but it's just the way things have always been done. And
oh, sure,
and I totally understand how hard this is. Believe me, it is very hard to support CAD/CAM. There are so many variables that you cannot control, especially when you are, working with, I suppose, clients who this is their first time of working with such a system, or it's not, and they're already used to a particular system. It's always the way they've done things, and you've got to be in there and sort of re-teach a few things to get rid of the bad habits.
Yeah.
And, it is really difficult. So I sympathize a lot with those service technicians that have, previously worked on servers, or they worked on, I don't know, some other CNC manufacturing equipment, and they've been parachuted in and told to understand how these micro CNC machines work without having the necessary training or the daily practical knowledge.
Sure.
That's where it's really hard.
Yeah.
So, I totally I get it. But this is how things should be done. And I know that in America, there are some companies like us. There are some in Europe as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
There's quite a bit of a difference.
Yeah. Are you the only one in Australia?
I'd say so. There might be. I mean, there's two that come to mind, but I think they're more leaning towards. The two that I think of are ones that were kind of opportunistic in that they were using these particular pieces of equipment, and then the parent company over in Europe has gone, well, such a small industry there, just give him the distributorship and he can maybe sell a couple of machines to some.
Sure, yeah.
So not to the standard, I suppose, that we're aiming for. In America, are there similar setups to what I'm talking about in terms of using what you sell and selling what you use on a smaller scale, or is it mainly the bigger guys like your Glidewells?
I would say there's a few that are kind of doing it like you do it, where they're not solely connected to one brand, but they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then everything else, I think, comes from resellers or manufacturers.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure there's some labs that resell. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, like I I think that it's a weird balance, because I think that if you focus too heavily on the manufacturing side, then you can lose sight of effectively supporting clients after you've sold to them. And then if you focus too heavily on the selling side, well, then you just become another big box reseller of CAD/CAM, and you're not actually supporting it well. Clients don't really know until it happens to them. So,
oh, yeah.
and that's a thing. It's like, I've always said that support is like, I'm sorry I'm going to say this, but support is like sex and water. It's the most important thing in the world when you don't have it. I think what happens is a customer will contact us and we'll speak to one of the sales team and we'll say, hey, I want to buy this intraoral scanner. And they're like, yeah, sure, here's a price. Oh, but I can get that scanner cheaper because some implant companies bundle it with 100 implants. And you're like, well, we don't bundle things in. And have you considered the support that you'd be getting with a scanner? Oh, that's fine. It just scans. It'll be fine. Okay, sure. And 3 months later, you get a phone call from that customer. Oh, geez, we really should have gone with you. This has been a nightmare. Now, the thing is, they hear what they want to hear as well, because quite often the clients are told from the start that we're just supplying a scanner. You'll get your rudimentary basic training and that's it. And they kind of hear what they want to hear because they see the dollar sign, and the dollar sign is less than the dollar sign that you presented them with. So the challenge always is that, are they getting value? Are they getting value for money from what we're providing them? Because what we're providing them is more than just a scanner or a mill or a printer, but it's a means of producing. And it's all well and good to have that mill there, but if you don't show people maintenance protocols around it so they actually look after the machine, you don't train them beyond producing a basic crown, you don't show them how to manage the milling strategies, then they're not going to get the best out of the mill. And whatever money they've saved has been sunk. So they need to see the value in working with us. Mind you, though, I mean, we've come to a point now in our maturity as a business that we compete on price as well. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But when it starts really getting into the nitty-gritty, I tend to walk away from a lot of conversations because the customer will never, has to see the value in us supporting them. But, yeah, increasingly they are, because increasingly they've all experienced some sort of horror story.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier how in older days people didn't get the training they needed, but I'm seeing that as a new trend now. And I go to offices and they just bought an iOS and nobody came to show them how to use it. It was all done on video.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yowzer, you spent how much? And they didn't even bother to show up. And they're like, no, it was just a video on how to use it. I'm like, oh my.
Yeah, I just, again, for some people that may be fine.
It shouldn't be, though.
No, I totally agree. And during COVID, we had the harshest lockdowns in the world.
Sure.
And one of the things that we had to do was, learn to be, agile and work out ways that could still support clients. So, we brought on AR technology through TeamViewer Pilot and a whole bunch of glasses that we sent out to clients to perform basic kind of troubleshooting or even repairs, because we literally could not leave our state. We couldn't leave our city. At one point, we couldn't leave more than 5 kilometers away from our homes. I think that if the energy is there and you want to get out there, you don't have to always physically get out there, but you got to do more than YouTube videos. I'll give you an example. Don't even remember which year this was because COVID was such a blur, but I think it might have been at the end of 2020. I had a client who purchased quite a large milling machine, the Corotech 350i Pro. Now, he had advised us prior to Christmas that I want to get this thing installed, and in the first week of January, I've got a bunch of bars that I want to have milled, and I want them all done in the first week of January. I'm like, well, the earliest we can come out to you will be on the 4th of January. He said, yeah, sure, okay, not a problem. So we booked in the guys to go over. Now, on the 31st of December, so New Year's Eve, I'm out for a very early dinner because I have 2 small children at the time. I think Estelle, my youngest, would have been only less than a year old, and and Chloe would have been 4 years old. You know, we had an early dinner. It's only like 5:15, as you do with kids. And my wife leans over and she says, "Have you seen the news?" She was just scrolling through her phone. I said, "No." She was the Western Australian Premier, which is where Perth is, has just closed down the state, effective immediately. So you guys aren't going to Perth next week. So at that point, I said, right. So had a little bit of a panic attack on the spot.
Sure.
Pulled up the client and I said, "Hey, listen, we're not going to be able to do this." He goes, "Well, I don't care. You know, I can't remember what it was, but he had some sort of background in engineering. He said, I can work it out." I said, "No, you're not. You know, we don't want you touching that mill because, you know, it's going to become a problem for us when it stops working." He said, "No, I've got it." I said, "Hang on, I've got an idea." So I said to the wife, "You just wait here for a minute." Zip down to the office, which is about 10 minutes away from where we're eating dinner. Got a pair of AR glasses that I'd only just picked up and started playing with, you know, a week or so before. Popped them in the mail, dropped it off at the post office, which thankfully was still open at that time.
Yeah.
And I said, "We'll do your install." And he said, "Okay, what changed your mind?" I go, "If you receive these AR glasses in the mail in time, we're going to do your install." And that following week, after the holiday period, we installed his mill remotely using TeamViewer Pilot, you know, setting 3D markers and animations and that in his field of vision. And he was able to install his mill. And it worked fantastic in that first week. No problems at all, milling bars. In fact, he was late on his first service. We always book in a service a year later, but he had gone away and his mill was working fine. So there's a lot you can do. If you've got the energy and the agility to support people, you'll find a way. And, that was a really good example of, you don't have to necessarily be there, but you have to be there. That makes sense. Now, had I just sent over a guy who used to service dental chairs and he went there with a user manual and went through a 33-step process on how to install this machine, probably would have gotten less value out of us actually doing that, of us getting him with his own hands to install the machine whilst we were his eyes and ears. So, I think there's much to be said about presence, and whether physical presence and also, I suppose, virtual presence, and what's more powerful.
How many times did you end up doing installs like that? A bunch?
Yeah, a bunch of them. Not as many. So larger mills like that, no. We kept that to an absolute bare minimum. Only because of, there's quite a few variables that you need to take into account. You know, physically being there is always, you know, the first option, but then it's not the only option. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So same goes with sport.
Sure. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about the ADIA.
Yeah.
You're on the board of the Australian Dental Industry Association. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so listen, it's obviously a non-executive role, and I'm really proud to be involved in that. So the ADIA is the body which represents the dental industry. So we don't work together with, but we do collaborate with other associations. So, for example, the Australian Dental Association, who represent the profession, dentists. And then there's a DOTA, they represent the oral health therapists, and a few others, guys who represent the dental prosthetists and like the ADPA. So a number of years ago, I actually contacted the offices of the ADIA to complain about something. And I think it was booth allocation, because the ADIA runs our main exhibitions here. So the ADIA, which is a fantastic show. If you ever come down to Australia, you should come and see it. But it's the largest show, I believe, in our region. So even in some parts of it might even be the largest show in APAC. I'm not sure, but in either case, it wouldn't be because of Singapore. But in either case, we had a really crappy booth allocation. So I contacted ADIA and started complaining. And the lady on the phone there said, well, we've got a really transparent process here. It's a ballot. And she tried to explain everything, and also try to explain all the other benefits of being an ADIA member, which includes, some membership into the Industry Australia, which offers, really good benefits for business management and development and like webinars, all that stuff. She started explaining all this. I said, yeah, I'm not worried about all of that. I just want a better booth allocation. She goes, well, if you don't like our processes, if you don't like what the ADIA is doing, then perhaps, you should do something about it as a member. You can always get involved and volunteer. And I went, sure, fine, no worries. And I was a little bit, I was being unreasonable, of course. And she pretty much said, well, you should just run for election then, or do something. I said, all right, I'll do that. And then, I started to learn a lot more about what the ADIA provides members, and it's exceptional. I mean, we're effectively all volunteers, and even the salaried members, the executive members, they certainly punch above their weight. They've done some amazing things in terms of working with government in advocating for better oral health outcomes for all Australians.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And they've been fantastic. So I ran for president, and I was like the dog that chased the car. The car stopped. But, so I won? Okay. And so I ran for Victorian branch president, and then after that really immersed myself in the ADIA, getting out to a lot of members and talking to them, and some of them are competitors as well, but we leave all that at the door and we work for the betterment of the industry and therefore for oral health in Australia. A couple of years into being the president, I was appointed to the board. So as a result of me representing all the other presidents within Australia. And I absolutely love the experience. I want to do a lot more, of course, but like all the other members, I run my own business, but I do try and get out there and speak to as many members as possible, work on getting as much feedback as we can to improve our advocacy for the industry in Australia. Try and do a lot of work around getting awareness around some of the benefits that kids can get in Australia. So we have a thing called the oral benefits, the child dental benefits schedule. So it gives kids, I think around $1,000 worth of free dental care every 2 years if they meet the eligibility criteria. But it's not really being taken up because it hasn't been exposed to enough people. So, we're just doing our very best to support the industry, but also really advocate for better oral health outcomes for all Australians. So it's been great.
What's the law in Australia? Can anybody be a dental technician, or do you have to have a degree? I know it's different country to country.
We could be here all night.
Maybe we should have started with this conversation.
It's... Oh, God, this is going to bring me into the whole conversation around the TGA, which is our equivalent of the FDA. But what I will say, and we can probably have a conversation about this another time, Elvis, but what I will say is that about 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago, we completely deregistered the dental technicians in Australia. So what that meant was that you didn't have to be a certified dental technician to work in a lab. Up until that time, you had to be certified, or you had to have I believe at the time you had to have an apprenticeship or a traineeship to be allowed to work in a laboratory, because you were effectively working on custom-made medical devices.
Sure.
Once they decided to deregulate that, it meant that technicians weren't compelled to go back and do continuing professional development. So don't go back and get your points to sort of make sure that you keep your registration, right?
Yeah, you don't need to anymore.
Problem with that is that there's all these new technologies that could have adverse effects down the line on patients. So, for example, if you don't properly post-process a night guard and it's not fully cured, then that can have an adverse effect on a patient, which can cause, which could be a problem for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, if that same technician who didn't do the post-processing work had been compelled to go back and do his CPD, he would have done his CPD on things that relate to him. And one of the things that relate to him is this new whiz-bang technology of 3D printing your night guard and then post-processing it in a polymerization unit, right?
Yeah.
Now, this kind of then ties into my whole argument of, well, why the hell haven't we done this? Why haven't we re-regulated, dental technicians to compel them to go back and do their training? Because they will do it on things that are important, that are contemporary, that they're going to use. So, I mean, that would be my argument. It's, I suppose, not really up to me. It's not even, I don't speak for the ADIA, and it's just a board member. But, we don't really have anything to do with that. But on a personal level, having come from a laboratory background and having seen the professionalism that laboratories had in those days, and they're owned by master technicians rather than accountants, I would like to go back to that. I'd like to go back to those professional standards. I'd like to go back to that propensity to continue to educate yourself. I think one of the saddest stories I ever heard was obviously China isn't regulated, and a friend of mine was dating a Chinese girl, and they went back to China and they went and visited one of her friend's laboratories at Image. Now, this lab had 2,500 people in it.
Yeah.
2,500 people. And he met a gentleman who sat there all day painting dyes. That's how much work that they had. So he literally sat there with a little brush. He was just painting the dyes all day. That's all he did. And I'm like, well, that sucks. You don't have to be a technician to do that. Definitely not. And poor guy is just doing this menial, boring, mindless task that isn't meaningful. And, I think it would be great. I don't know who could change that, but it certainly would be good if they could certify technicians again. Is America decertified as well?
Oh, we've never been certified. It's scary. I tell people all the time my mom could open a lab tomorrow and she knows nothing about it.
Oh, well, like we have here, we've got accountants owning laboratories, and they just see it as a numbers game. I mean, I'm not going to go into the whole outsourcing thing, but there's guys who are just sending all this stuff overseas, and they just see it as a numbers thing. They got one guy QCing everything, and that's it. But I know in Europe, I believe most countries in Europe still certify their technicians.
Yep.
I just think that you would have less issues around registering medical devices. You probably wouldn't need to be as stringent. You'd probably want to narrow down on the importers, of course, ensuring that they have their certificates of conformity all lined up and they're meeting all the requirements and they're batch tracking and doing all those things. And then you'd want to hope that technicians are continually kept to account to understand what they're working with.
I agree. I mean, I kind of wish regulation would happen here, honestly. It would be a huge disruption into the industry, and I think we'd lose a lot of employees, but for the greater good, I think there has to be some sort of regulation.
Well, is there a skill shortage in the US in regards to technicians?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So the thing is, where I look at it is, yeah, sure, we might go 2 steps back because then you lose even more technicians. But then wouldn't it make being a dental technician more attractive as a career path, knowing that you have to go and get your piece of paper, that it is effectively a profession?
Yeah.
And see, that's my argument is, unless they scale it, again, I'm talking nonsense here because I have no idea who would do this, and it'd be great if someone would do it, but I don't see anyone doing it. I don't even know who would be responsible for it. But let's just say in utopia here, if they did this and said that, you guys need to get registered in the next 3 to 5 years, whatever it is. And at that point, you can start promoting dentistry as a quality career path. And for the guys who fall short that aren't quite clever enough to be dentists,
Oh, sure.
I say it with very bold inverted commas. To be dentists, they may have fallen short. They may, maybe looking at other industries where they're producing custom-made medical devices, but this one actually has a profession attached to it. It's got a piece of paper. It's something that is transferable that I can take overseas. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, I know that I've got a nephew who's like 16, 17, has no idea what he wants to do. It wouldn't be great to go to him and say, hey, mate, you can get your piece of paper. And, this is a profession.
Oh, I agree. I mean, here in the States, you need a piece of paper to cut somebody's hair or give somebody a massage. But to recreate fully functioning dental, no, you don't need it. Isn't that just nuts?
It's mental. It's insane.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I thought the States would have had that in place, but...
Sorry to burst your bubble.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, cool.
Well, Sam, this has been great. Thank you so much. I've loved kind of the looking into the industry in Australia. We talked to a lot of suppliers and customer service, but none from Australia, and I appreciate your perspective you brought. Thank you.
And listen, and Elvis, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, and I'd like to do it more offline, of course. And I've always said that I love making connections and meeting new people, and certainly it's weird, you're so far away, but we share a very similar kind of perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing where your stories come from, it's just great to chat. So I really do appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Thanks for giving us a glimpse into tomorrow.
Well, tomorrow's going to be a great day. I've got a full day of work to go ahead with, and you've probably got a nice scotch to have before you head off to bed.
I'm heading to bed.
Lovely.
Awesome, Sam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elvis. Take care.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Have a great night. Bye.
Have you ever wanted to learn XOCAD? Do you find learning a new design software overwhelming or just too costly because you have to go to a course that takes a whole weekend? Even if you've never used a design software before, we have the perfect solution for you to begin your XOCAD journey. Head over to instituteofdigitaldentistry.com and select the Mastering XOCAD course. Broken down into 3 segments, the amazing Marjorie will take you through fundamentals, then immediate, and then advanced courses, leaving you with the confidence to tackle most cases that come into your lab. I personally am going through all 70 lessons and find it one of the most thorough courses that I can take at my own pace. And for being a listener of the podcast, if you enter the code VOICES, which is VOICES, when checking out, IDD will take an additional 10% off any course they offer. And they offer a ton of content for labs and clinics. Head over to the instituteofdigitaldentistry.com for this episode's show notes for more information.
A big thanks to Sam for joining Elvis on the podcast. Barb is so sorry she was unable to make the conversation. We appreciate you coming on, and as Elvis said, giving us and our listeners a different perspective on our industry from another country. If anyone in Australia is interested in getting equipment from a company that actually uses the same equipment on a daily basis, head over to xyzdental.com.au. Sam seriously sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Thanks, Sam, and good luck on your future success and getting regulation back in Australia. Sometimes it only takes one voice to start a change.
Ooh, I love that. Thank you, Joe.
Every time you come on, I think we're going to be out of work.
Well, I don't want to start anything, but I love supporting you guys. And don't forget, I'm your #1 fan.
And we love you too.
Almost every week, Barb mentions you. I usually edit it out because it's too much of an inside joke.
Well, I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Not live from Tampa, but they're live from Tampa. We will talk to you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye. But you have to do it in Barb's voice.